So welcome to another episode of the Clyde and Lomond Heritage Podcast with myself, Paul Murdoch. This is a special episode and it's an audio interview with Duncan Thompson, who's the chairman of the Strathleven Artisans. They run the Renton Station Heritage Centre for Robert the Bruce, well worth a visit. They've produced this book called Bruce Oak Heart, Tour of the King's Realm. Again, well worth a read. We'll talk about that with Duncan. Until then, on with the podcast.
Hi, my name's Duncan Thompson. I'm chairman of Strathleven Artisans.
So basically, Duncan, I'm doing a wee piece on Robert the Bruce, but my podcast is Clyde and Lomond Heritage. Yeah. So obviously my interest is mainly when he was in this area.
Yeah, definitely.
He passed through the area a few times, reading your book, which we'll talk about later on. Yeah. Which is actually, I think, the most comprehensive history of his life. Really detailed. It's such a convoluted journey he had.
Aye.
When you think about going right back to Alexander III, it was quite peaceful times in Scotland and England.
The golden times, yeah, the golden times.
And then he passed away, and his young daughter passed away as well.
Margaret, aye.
Left a vacuum, and who did they ask to come and help them?
Aye, Longshanks. Of all the people, they invited the snake into the pit, you know what I mean? It was just bad, man, bad.
Bad news. And hindsight's a great thing.
Aye, they were really friendly with Longshanks, right enough. He was Robert Bruce's grandfather was Robert the Competitor, and he was in line to be king. He was one of the contenders for the kingship, and he had saved the life of Edward Longshanks across in the Holy Land. So he thought he was in a good fitting with him, you know what I mean? But it was nothing at all to do with friendship and all that. It was all to do with politics, and he knew that he could control John Balliol, but he knew he couldn't control Robert Bruce, you know what I mean? So the competitor, Right. So they picked the one that he could control. And I feel sorry for John Balliol that day, you know what I mean? He stepped into the pit as well, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There was nobody winning that fight with Longshanks. He was the man. He was genius, that man, you know what I mean? He was a warrior and a genius at his trade.
It's quite...
So if you're up against him, you're in a bad position, you know what I mean? Well, William Wallace found that out, you know.
That is, eventually, he
did. Yeah.
And I didn't even know about things like the Battle of Berwick and Tweed, how they actually took over the town and actually massacred thousands of people in the town.
I reckon there was something in the region of 11 to 13,000 people killed.
Just butchered, basically.
Butchered, slaughtered over 2 days, they done it. Aye, just killed, because the people were kind of mocking them for the ramparts and all that, you know what I mean, and embarrassed them a wee bit. So when they got in, they paid a heavy price for it, you know.
So and I guess that resonated through Scotland as a kind of warning to the rest of
everybody. That was it. It was laying down a marker then, saying that if you stand up against me, this is going to be the result, you know. Mm-hmm. And he only stopped the second day because he seen a pregnant woman being killed, you know what I mean. And he says, right, that's enough, you know.
That's enough. Good grief. So that was the start of not the start, but it's definitely a time where it seemed to be people were changing sides a lot.
Aye, well, you had to,
people have been pragmatic, I suppose, and just likes of Bruce himself seemed to be on Longshanks, Edward I side sometimes, and then he would be on the people of Scotland side sometimes.
Definitely, yeah. He was part of a company. I mean, he was one of the CEOs of a company, you know what I mean? And the company moved that way, he moved with them, you know what I mean? And he wasn't in control of it a lot of the times, you know what I mean? But, there was times he didn't really have a choice, you know what I mean? If you've got a dagger at your throat, then you're going to hit it. I don't know, I've never heard a story where somebody had a dagger at their throat and says, no, I'm not swearing fealty, and they get stabbed, you know what I mean? You would say, aye, well, and then you change your mind at a later date, you know what I mean?
Of course, when it's easier.
And they'd done that twice to Longshanks, you know, and Longshanks liked him. Longshanks thought he was a great warrior. No, he was a jousting champion when he was 18 down in London, and that young Robert the Bruce.
Right, I didn't know that.
Aye, yeah, he was a jousting. So that's the Bruce and the Boon, they fought for the crown, the bugger the Bruce, he cut the Boon down, you know. The Boon was charging him as a jouster, and he's charging a champion jouster who just sidestepped him at the last second and killed him stone dead, you know what I mean? That was his trade, you know what I mean? That was his thing. Yeah.
Also, I would say sort of the early 1300s and stuff like that, it looked as if there was a few battles between Bruce and King Edward where Bruce got advantage, and then Bruce was running away again.
Yeah.
And then at one point, Bruce was even in Edward's side when he was fighting Stirling Castle.
Yeah.
And he was taking like siege engines for Edward to the side.
He built them in Dumbarton, I believe, you know what I mean, and shipped them up to Stirling for Longshanks. Yeah, he was.
And they were some of the biggest siege engines ever built.
The biggest of the Warwolf was the biggest siege engine ever built then. And Stirling Castle had capitulated, they had surrendered, but he was that desperate to see it working. He kept them inside the castle and then bombarded it for a while just to see it working, you know what I mean?
I think it was 3 big machines, but again, the details are in the book.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, it got to the point where Bruce was really on the run and he had to seek refuge in Loch Lomond side a wee bit.
He sought refuge with Malcolm Earl Lennox, yeah. They got slaughtered at the Battle of Dowree, you know what I mean? It was a really bad result. He was a chivalric knight and he went to the castle to fight. And they would fight with him. He says, "Oh, this is you might be a heathen, but I'm not a heathen, you know what I mean? This is Sunday, we're not fighting on a Sunday, you know." And so the Valens says he went to fight with him, and Bruce left, went away 4-6 miles away into a forest and set up camp for the night to fight the next day. Mm-hmm. And just afore dawn the next day, they were attacked by the English and
taking the surprise. I heard he was dehorsed about 3 times or something like that, and he still got back on and managed to get away with just about.
I was just listening to Max Muir thing the other day, a wee podcast that he does, and he was saying that the Crystal Knight put him back on his horse again 3 times, you know what I mean, and saved his life 3 times, you know.
You'd see.
So, but it shows you the man he was, getting cut down off a horse and then up onto an Arho and then onto another. You know, he was some guy. I mean, like me, I started off as a Scottish boy reading Tranter's Wallace, mm-hmm. which led me on to the trilogy of Robert the Bruce, the big thick book that Tranter done 3 books in one. Mm-hmm. And the more I read about him, I thought, this is some guy, you know, because I knew all about the stuff where he had turned traitor and he had sworn fealty to the English and all that twice and done it back and forward. But once you get to put the story together, you realise that the whole time that he's in England, he's feeding information to Scotland all the time, telling people where they're coming, how many are coming, who it is that's coming, how to fight them and all that, you know. So all that was going on. He done it to John the Red Cummins when he fought the Battle of Roslin Glen. There was 30,000 Englishmen come up and Bruce had already sent all the information up that they needed to fight them, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they stupidly split into three different lots.
What the English did?
Aye. And he the Cummins, his Dewey, fought the three lots of 10,000 over the one day, him and his men, and beat the three lots of 10,000. Incredible human beings, you know what I mean? Incredible human beings.
So then what happened obviously Malcolm gave Bruce refuge a bit in Loch Lomond side on his way to, I guess, Dumbarton. And the West Coast, he was trying to get to the West Coast.
Yeah, he was trying to get across to Argyll. And
Angus Ogg helped him as well down in Campbelltown and stuff.
Angus Ogg got him ships and that and got him away, yeah. Angus Ogg, he was an incredible warrior for Robert the Bruce and a brilliant sailor. He had devised a new way on the Scottish Berlins, which is, for all the world, it looks like a Viking ship. But at the Scottish Berlins, and he had devised a new rudder system which could turn the ship on its own axis. So when they were getting chased with the bigger ships, they would let them get as close as they possibly could, and then Angus Ogg would turn the ship right round, and then these big ships had to take a big loop to get back to him. But by that time, they were well away, you know what I mean?
Right.
So great. Saved them a couple of times.
Wow. And I guess what happened then between that and Bannockburn?
Well, there's a lot of disappearing times. A lot of times where Bruce has disappeared. He's meant to be on Rathlin. Personally, I think he was trying to get to Norway, his sister. You know what I mean, or maybe even Ireland, where he could kind of disappear in the family lands and all that. You know what I mean, for a rest for a while. But it's Rathlin Island gets the credit for having it with the spider and all that. You know, and the spider's a Sir Walter Scott invention. It's not an actual spider.
Right, okay, because I read somewhere that wasn't just Robert the Bruce in the cave. Was it Douglas was with him, and so this is obviously his conjecture.
Aye, he would have a half a dozen people with him at any time. You know what I mean? Basically, his personal bodyguard would stay with him. You know what I mean? But there was times when he was on his own. He had to run. The time when the Buchanans had his hound, they got his hunting hound, and they started to hunt him. They started to walk the dog up and down Argyll and that until the dog picked up his scent, and then started to chase after his master. You know what I mean? And Bruce had to dive into a river and swim down a river to get away from the dog. You know what I mean? But the dog was trying to fun him. You know what I mean? It was,
okay, wow.
And nearly got him killed. Aye.
So obviously Bannockburn, he comes back and goes head to head with.
Once he went to Bannockburn, and when he left for Bannockburn here at Dumbarton Castle, up next to Dumbarton Castle, where the golf course and that is the new, there was a flooded area, a tidal flood area called the Bay of Murroch, and the Bay of Murroch was for 3 metres deep to 15 metres deep at times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the week of Bannockburn, the reckon there was something like 300 to 500 Viking ships lay off Dumbarton Castle and into the Bay of Murroch, and I know with Angus Og and all his fleet, and his sister was Queen of Norway, Queen Dowager of Norway at the time, and she had sent down her personal bodyguard and all that to fight with him, you know. So
it wasn't just the Scots that were there, you reckon there was more?
Oh, there was Norwegians and all that, there definitely, Danes and all that, definitely. Yeah.
There's even a rumour, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's 1307 where the Knights Templar were disbanded.
Yeah.
And a lot of them supposedly came to the West Coast. And it said some of them turned up to help.
There's variations from 700 to 1300 of them arrived in Argyll, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
you've got
to be well planned. You know, we were excommunicated at that time.
Of course.
They were excommunicated, so it was a safe haven for them, you know what I mean? Bruce obviously wasn't silly, you know what I mean? He knew if he's taking their warriors in, even just learning the stuff that they knew, never mind all the new weapons that appeared on the scene, the new lances, the new shields and helmets and all that kind of stuff appeared for Bannockburn. This new formation and moving a Sheltron, you know, maybe a couple of thousand men at a time, spinning them, running it.
You reckon that basically Bruce had new technology?
I think so, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's such a close period of time where they change from standing still in a Sheltron waiting and people throwing axes at them and killing them and getting in and destroying them, to moving forward. I mean, the thing that got Bannockburn for me was the half pace. You know, once the Sheltrons were set up, and Edward II didn't believe they were going to fight. He thought they were kneeled down to pray and then back onto their feet again. And for me was the half pace. They were taking a wee half pace at a time. They running and trying to get close right away and warning people what they were doing. They just took a wee tiny half pace at a time, the whole Sheltron, and just slowly but surely moved towards the English, which shut down their ability to charge them with the war horses. And the war horses was the main machine. They were the thing that were going to break it up and win the day. But they couldn't. By the time they realised what was happening, they had cut the distance down enough that the great horses couldn't charge. So the great horses became a wall in front of the archers. Some people say that the archers started to fire at their own men to drop the horses and drop the men to try and fire through into the Scots, you know. So,
wow. But
it was a disaster. It was genius in the behalf of Robert the Bruce, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So after that, I mean, he was king before that, obviously. But after that, was it kind of ratified after that more? Was it?
It was more or less just clearing out individual castles and things like that, strongholds that held out, you know what I mean? That was... Stirling was the last big one to go. Once Stirling fell, that was hit. They had the whole central belt of Scotland, you know what I mean? And it was vital. Stirling Castle was vital. And that's how when his brother Edward done the deal, it says that Robert punched him out an oak table, you know what I mean? But, and Edward couldn't understand what's wrong. He's like, they'll no come. They've never came for any other castle. They'll no come for it. He says they'll come for this one. Mm-hmm. This is vital, you know what I mean? Aye, they'll come for it, all right.
That was Edward Bruce you're talking about.
Edward, his brother, who became King of Ireland in the year after Bannockburn, the High King of Ireland. Because the Bruce boys were princes at Carrickfergus, so they had a foothold in that Celtic realm as well, you know.
So after Bannockburn to here, which did he come? He came here what, 1326?
26, yeah, 1326.
So what happened between Bannockburn and that then?
Well, he's trying to put the country together. He was smart enough that he knew that just winning wars wasn't going to build the economy of the country. He took 1,000 artisans in for all of Europe he opened the doors to people to come in and trade and craftsmen and all these things to build the economy of the country, you know what I mean? There was a famine in 1315, you know what I mean? And the Nordic Alliance were sending across shiploads of grain and stuff like that to keep us. So we were well quoted, you know what I mean? They were well thought of, you know. But there was a lot of periods where they would get down into England, into the north of England, invade the north of England and cause hassle, you know what I mean? Cause battles and things like that. And that was just to keep the pot boiling, you know what I mean? To keep the pressure on all the time, you know what I mean? And
to basically say, keep back.
Aye, stay away, we're not interested in you being here, you know what I mean? And it says that in 1320 in the Declaration of Arbroath, you know, we're a wee tiny country away out the road, no bothering anybody, we're not interested in fighting with people. But if you come, then you come, you know what I mean? It'll be your own fault, you know what I mean? Yeah. And they basically lay the blame at all the souls that'll be sent to heaven. They lay the blame on the Pope. They're saying, you've got the ability to stop this. So it's up to you to stop it, you know what I mean? They'll listen to you. They'll not listen to us, but they'll listen to you, you know. So it basically left the souls of all the dead people at the foot of the Pope. And he didn't rush into it, but eventually he thought, nah, this is no good, you know. So,
okay. So by 1326, when Bruce decided to retire, there's a lot of conjecture about exactly where, but you guys seem to have done a bit of research on it and pinpointed it a bit more.
We were always looking. We were really lucky. Our historian had retired before we started, but when we started up, he used to run the Bruce Society in Dumbarton, a wee guy called Stuart Smith, who all credit's due to, you know what I mean? He was the guy who found the documentation to say the King's Viscera were buried in Leavengrove and stuff like that, you know. So he came out of retirement and joined us, and we just asked him to do things for the press and things, so we could he would get the dates right and know the numbers of people and things like that, because that's important, you know what I mean? And he came out of retirement and joined us and helped us a lot, you know what I mean? We've got a whole collection of his medieval artefacts.
So it said he retired to the parish of Cardross, but the parish of Cardross was a big parish.
Yeah, the parish of Cardross runs from St Martin's School in Renton to Roseneath.
Right.
So it's a massive. It's still the same parish today. Still the same size parish today. You know what I mean? So what he had to do was buy swaths of land at a time, and he bought. What happened was his son John died up north in one of the castles, and they reckon it was dampness. The influenza had got him, you know what I mean, and dampness. So he had David II as his next son, and so therefore that's the king. He had 10 children altogether, Robert the Bruce, but no all of them were legitimate, you know what I mean? So David was, so he knows about the manor house here in Rent. He's been hunting there for he was a wee boy of 12 with his grandfather and Malcolm Earl Lennox and all that. He's done that. There's several records of that. So, in his wisdom, he thinks, right, go to and he's safe here. He's got a river Leven right next to him, you know what I mean? He's got a castle if he needs the castle. He's perfect. He's in the middle of Gaeldom. It's all Gaelic-speaking people here, and so it's pretty safe here, you know, and he knows he's safe here. He's had here, as you say, during the wars a couple of times, you know what I mean?
So whereabouts exactly for local people now was the manor, do you think? Is it?
Well, we can't say it. I can't say to you the manor houses. We need an archaeologist to do that. And in 2008-9, they had stripped all the buildings away from Dalhurn, and they came across the foundations of a house where there wasn't any buildings other than these two buildings, and it turned out, as the archaeologist, excuse me, worked on it, turned out to be Tobias Mullet's grandfather's house. And the next bit was a stable block, the stable block for the house. So one of the charters for this William Smollett is that he rents the King's Manor House of Pillinflat and outbuildings thereof for 40 shillings to be paid per annum to Dumbarton Castle.
Right. So
the thinking is that he's rented the land at first and liked it and bought it eventually, you know what I mean? And we're going along the lines now that we're hoping that he stripped he stripped the old manor house a brick to recycle the brick to use on his new manor house. So some of the brick that might be in the foundations now may very well have medieval workings on them, you know what I mean? Okay. So we're going to try and go in that direction, because we're trying to... The archaeologist that was working on it pointed out some 14th century lime mortar to us, you know what I mean? And and we got it tested. We took it to Kouros, to the Lime Centre in Kouros, and it was dated as 13th or 14th century lime mortar from a chapel or cathedral of that period. We know there wasn't a cathedral, but he built a chapel. He bought the manor house, built a 100-foot great hall, built the Queen's chambers, and then built a chapel royal and chancery at the end of the house for writing charters. There's 500 charters signed by the Cardus seal, the Great Seal.
So we're talking about Dulhurn, maybe towards Dulmoke, somewhere in between there. Yeah.
Oh, that whole area, right from Dulhurn Point into Dumbarton, right round the coast. You know what I mean? There's a 13th century chapel in Cardus.
St Mayhew's.
St Mayhew's. Now, St Mayhew's would have been visited by Robert the Bruce on many occasions. I've absolutely no doubt. Every time he passed there.
There's still an old part of St Mayhew's. Some of it's newer, but there is an old part still. And St Serph's, obviously, in Leaden Grove.
Cardus, Well, that would be the nearest chapel to him. That was a royal chapel, so that was only for, like, emergencies or bad weather or that. They would use that chapel. The main chapel was St Serph's, you know what I mean? And it's St Serph's that was the chapel that was built when he moved here. That was already built there.
And tell me, it says he wasn't very well in the last 3 years of his life. He was here between 1326, 1329.
Yeah.
And some say he had leprosy.
He definitely didn't have leprosy.
Right.
He definitely did not have leprosy. There's a Professor Coventry in Edinburgh University who told us that there's a professor across in Edinburgh University, a young guy who does place names, and part of his book is that he's discovered that there wasn't actually leprosy in Scotland until the 15th century. So I don't know about that, but that's what he's saying. So that's interesting. But I do know that Robert the Bruce's father had leprosy.
Right. Well, that seems strange.
You know, but he stayed in Writtle in England. You
right.
know what I mean? So.
And funnily enough, the collegiate in Dumbarton, it was middle of 15th century. It had a leprosy colony.
A leprosy, but aye. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know about that. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Christian Corbett, the guy who done the Buster Robert the Bruce for Lord Elgin, the Bruce to the Day, his team, their speciality is rebuilding faces of the pharaohs and people like that. He does soldiers and different people through history. He's rebuilt their faces and that. He's a forensics artist, you know what I mean? Yeah. And he done a Buster Robert the Bruce, and they tested the bones and that then. They got a finger bone and the jaw. A guy, Nielsen, Professor Nielsen, definitely says he didn't have leprosy, you know what I mean?
Because the thing that obviously backs that, I think, is that it said that he used to go hunting in the area. Aye. And you don't have the energy, I wouldn't have thought.
No, you're not allowed to be in a group of more than 15 people at one time. You're not allowed to drink out of wells, the same wells as other people either, you know what I mean? And it's one of the hardest things to catch, but you can just look at somebody and think, I'm not drinking that, you know what I mean? No. And for us, for the fear of leprosy, for then to the new is, back in the 80s and the 90s when AIDS and things like that came out, everybody was terrified to drink out a glass or hang with somebody else.
Obviously COVID.
It was fear. COVID's the same thing. It's that mass fear everybody gets right away, you know what I mean? And that if you're looking at the leprosy thing as propaganda for our enemies, then that's about the best thing they could say that he had was leprosy, because everybody, even if you're doubting a wee bit, you back away, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you know what, but nobody backed away from him. He never changed any. He was battling, he was still in battles, you know? Mm-hmm. And with leprosy, your fingers do a thing called penciling, that they go into points, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Your septum gets eaten away first, your face gets eaten away first, you know what I mean? And Robert the Bruce's skull still had its septum, you know what I mean?
Okay. So yeah, it's quite a strange one, that. What do you think he actually died of then? I'm not sure. He had this illness for years. What age would he have been when he passed away?
It was 2 weeks before his 55th birthday.
Right. which is probably a good age then.
A great age then, yeah, definitely. Malcolm Earl Lennox died at 69, right enough, in full armour at the Battle of Halidon Hill, so
Wow.
he was right fit, you know what I mean?
Wow,
He was some guy. But at 55, and he put it down to the hardships of the first 3 years of running and hiding in Argyll, and the cold and the wet and the damp and all that, you know what I mean? But it sounds to me like epilepsy or something like that. Because he could be stoned and talking away to everybody, and then he would just lie down and go to sleep like a fit, you know what I mean? He would just go and sleep for 3 days. And one of the times your Buchanans were chasing him and his men were carrying him on a litter. And when they caught one of Bruce's men, and they were doing a bit of torture and things like that, they were saying, "How did you know on him out? How did you not just gaze him? He was sleeping. He wouldn't have known you done it." And he says, "Because he would have done that for us." That was the answer.
So it's great loyalty to him.
He would have done that for us.
And that's the same Buchanans that are in Lust still.
That's the same Buchanans that's in Lust still to this day.
Who ended up fighting the McGregors in the Battle of Glenfrew.
And paid a sore price for that.
We'll cover that in another podcast.
That's a good story, that one.
It is, But no, I want to thank you for that. And I'll just finally, can we talk a wee bit about the book?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I'll bring it across to you.
Yeah.
So this is about, just to introduce it, the Bruce Oak Hart Tour of the King's Realm. And that's available at the Venton.
It's at the centre, and you can get it on eBay as well.
Yep.
Different venues on eBay and places like that. What we've done was when we started up at first, it was always when we started up the Artisans, I'll go through this really quickly. When we started up the Artisans, it was people like myself who are recovering alcoholics and addicts who started an art class for the Waynes. We decided to do an art class in woodworking and things like that. You know what I mean? Big guy John Woodcock came to work with us. John works in Catherine the Vale today, teaching people to do woodwork and all that. So John had came and worked with us for a couple of years right at the start. And it was John that carved the Great Seal and things like that. So it came up that the King's Heart hadn't made it to the Holy Land. His dying wish was that his heart would be taken to the Holy Land, and prayers said for his soul, for all the people that he had killed, you know what I mean? So James Douglas and his men tried to do that, but they ended up in a battle in Teba in Spain with the mighty Alfonso, the great Alfonso, you know what I mean? And it cost him. He didn't want to fight James Douglas. He didn't want to fight, you know, and he refused the king because he had the Bruce's heart round his neck, and he had it round his neck for a year. And King Alfonso had done the same thing the year before, so he knew that going to Jerusalem was super important to James Douglas.
So why did they fight?
Well, he was embarrassed, didn't he? What happened was the chroniclers who chronicled the meeting says that King Alfonso was saying, "Please, you're the greatest spear in Christendom, and please join us, you know what I mean, give my army a great boost." And James Douglas kept saying, "I'm sorry, I need to go to Jerusalem, you know what I mean, that's where I'm heading, to Jerusalem, you know." And the king kept asking him, and then the chronicler says that as James Douglas and the king parted, the king says to him, shouted at him and says, "Well, okay then, Sir James, I'll give you your weight in gold if you fight for us." And the chronicler says that James Douglas backed away from him as though for a flame, and shouted at the king, "My Lord King, the men of Scotland don't fight for money. We fight for the man on the cross and for freedom itself. And this day we'll let loose the lion of Scotland on the plains of Teba." And 11 of them were killed at that Battle of Teba, you know. And the great people of Spain have a 3-day festival every year to honour these guys, you know what I mean? Absolutely fantastic, right? So anyway, we decided to take the heart to Jerusalem.
The metaphorical heart, obviously. The actual heart.
Well, we're taking the heart to Jerusalem.
Right, okay.
We're the King's Guard at Pillenflat. We're the King's personal bodyguard here. We're the 40 bowmen of St Sebastian, who were Robert Bruce's personal bodyguard. So we done it. We thought that way, and we were going that way. So we went to historic Scotland and people like that and it started off a bit of panic, you know what I mean? But anyway, we weren't allowed to take the heart. They wouldn't let us take the real heart. So a guy called Arthur Murdoch was listening. He wasn't even involved in the conversation. Arthur was a carver and carved away and that. And he came in a couple of days later and he plunked down this big oak heart made out of Bruce oak for the king's tree.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, here, take his heart. He touched that tree, so take that heart and that'll do for him just the same, you know.
Right.
So a couple of years later, 10 years later, not a couple of years, 10 years later, a wee friend of ours who was adopted into the Renton 45 years ago, a wee Palestinian boy, Simon Collins, was going to Jerusalem to see family that he had found. As I say, him and his sister were adopted into the Renton because they'd been killed, they thought. But anyway, they found some family and he was going back across. And I asked him if he would take the wooden heart and my heart to Jerusalem and take it to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and say prayers for it, for Robert the Bruce. And he'd done that. He'd done that. He'd done a good job at taking lots of photos and we got it well documented, you know what I mean? So we now think that Robert the Bruce can rest that wee bit easier, that we've taken his heart to the Holy Land and said prayers for him, you know what I mean? And the book comes for that. We decided that we would write a story, not just particular about, but the whole journey of Robert the Bruce, you know. A guy called Jim Gohully collated it for us, you know what I mean? Jim's a fantastic researcher, you know what I mean? And yourself, of course, was involved in the book, so absolutely fantastic. We couldn't have done it without you, that's for sure. But it's a great book. It's absolutely
pleasure. No, it's a smashing book, and it's hardback and paperback.
Hardback and paperback, and anybody that's read it, that's took it and read it, has. I mean, I know you would say that anyway if you met somebody that wrote a book, but they reckon that they're sorry they never had it 2 or 3 years ago to plan their journeys and all that. They would have seen a lot more. They would have known a lot more. And this is a where to find in Robert the Bruce. Totally. That's for sure. It's, totally. For the first pages to the last pages, it's just full of information on him, battlefields, chapels, churches, anywhere he was at, birth for children, everything's in it, you know what I mean? And Robert the Bruce's aide-de-camp here at Renton was Sergeant Murdoch.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he was Robert Bruce's sergeant here at Renton was Sergeant Murdoch, and owned a manor house up at the back of the Moke House.
Aye.
Yeah.
I'll need to dig about, see if I have any claim to that.
Aye, get it. The money's piling up there. You're sitting here skint, you know what I mean?
No, that sounds great. And what we'll do is we'll take a few pictures and we'll show people on the YouTube version of this, some of the pictures. What happened with
Robert the Bruce? When Robert the Bruce died, it was said that there was great wailing in every village and town in Scotland when they heard their good king, because he was called the good King Robert, you know what I mean? He was a kind guy, very kind guy.
Aye.
He wasn't lavish, he didn't wear silks and all that. He wore normal clothes and as normal as he could, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories of the oarsmen and the Renton making a year's wages in a week with their own knights to come and see the king's body and all that, you know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely amazing, you know. And the entourage that ended up here in the thousands, you know what I mean? So just to see their good king, you know what I mean? They couldn't believe it.
Part of his body was buried in St. Sayre, so.
Part of his viscera, or his
internal organs.
Internal organs were buried in St. Sayre, so it's a royal burial, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And it was Stuart Smith that found the documentation for that, and he was going to Historic Scotland for 10 years and wasn't getting very far, and then he got Lord Elgin involved, the Bruce to the day, and within 3 months it was made into a national monument, you know what I mean?
And I have to say as well that Lord Elgin, who's the kind of descendant of Robert the Bruce, current descendant, wrote the foreword to your book as well.
He did, yeah.
So man, that gives it a stamp of approval, surely.
Aye, it's Charles Bruce.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's smashing.
Some book, great book. I would advise anybody that's thinking about come and have a look at it. Once you see it, you'll buy it.
Every school should have it as well.
That's for sure. Aye, it should be in the national schools, definitely. Aye, it's such an important book, I think. You know what I mean? And
well, Duncan, I just want to thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
I found out so much more this morning I didn't know about.
Aye.
And hopefully people will listen to this and
we didn't even cover the lion's pit across it, the pet lion that he kept across at the Lion's Gate.
All right, well, quick, let's talk about that. The Lion's Gate across it.
Cumberland.
Aye.
Across at the Bond.
Across at the Bond.
That big monument out the front.
Strathleven Park.
That's to commemorate King Robert the Bruce's pet lion that he kept there, a lion that he kept there as a pet, and it says that only he could clap it. You know what I mean? And the guy who looked after it was John the Lion Keeper. He fed it and all that, and there's getting the Exchequer rolls, you'll see bills for food for the lion, you know what I mean? The lion kept it at Brenton. And John the Lion Keeper, when David II was getting taken to Scone to be crowned King of Scotland, there was 80 shillings spent on building a cage to take the lion up to Scone Palace. And Scone, John the Lion Keeper and the lion were put into Glamis Castle. Right. He was gifted Glamis Castle, and he stayed there. And they became the Boleyns, John Boleyns, the Queen Mother's ascendance to the throne. You know what I mean? He married Robert Bruce's granddaughter.
Well, my granny was a lion.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
big circle, mate.
Strange.
And your ancestors are sergeant at arms here at
Strange.
The bloodline, mate.
Hannah Lyon. Definitely. She lived in a wee cottage, still a ruin, just down from Carman Fort, along from the reservoir. There's a wee ruin, a cottage there, and she lived there as a wee girl.
I know it well. It used to be called the Watermans.
She lived there as a wee girl and used to walk to school for there every day and back.
I hugged a tree one day, right at that big house, that wee house. That's famous. There's loads of renting people with their ashes and that are all spread about there.
I took my cousins to see it for Canada recently. But my dad used to tell me that's where he's.
Great place to have a house, man.
Oh,
so you're sitting there, you just right up the loch and up the Clyde, and it's absolutely fantastic, man. Great
anyway,
place.
Thanks again, pal.
Oh, you're welcome.
If you want more heritage content, go to Clydesider TV and follow them on Facebook and Instagram too.